Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and I hope you're enjoying your holidays a lot. I definitely am, and a lot of that has to do with the addition of a character who's quickly become one of my favorites in all of Star Wars lore. I'm talking about Jod. I like some characters in Star Wars because they're just really well written, they're really well portrayed and acted, like Luthen Rael. I mean, he's a hell of a character. But Jod really hits a bit more home for me. I personally really like him because of how I interact with Star Wars. You see, I'm not a huge fan of the Jedi, and if you follow this channel, you probably know that. I just don't naturally trust people with magical powers, in fictional franchises and also in real life. When I play an RPG, I'm always the warrior or the rogue. I don't like wizards at all. I even made Revan in my first playthrough of Knights of the Old Republic a gunslinger for as long as possible because I always found stuff like the Jedi shouldn't use blasters and other rules like that kind of dumb. I don't hate the Force itself or the concept of this magical energy field in the Star Wars galaxy. I think it's an important part of the lore. It's what makes Star Wars very different from other franchises. But yeah, just like my views on spirituality and religion, I believe, I trust the individual to make their own relationship with these kind of powers and these belief systems more than I trust an institution to do it for them. Because in my experience, when large groups of people gather together, they always develop a groupthink mentality in one way or another. It's inevitable, and sometimes it is necessary. One could argue in the case of the Jedi Order. But there's always going to be individuals that suffer from that groupthink model because they are different. And because of that difference, they become victimized or restrained by the group. They become feared. I mean, look at the Jedi Order in its last few years of existence. It had become so dogmatic that a good portion of the Jedi Order were alienated from its teachings, and at the same time still forced to be in the Jedi Order, which is a disaster, which is a recipe for disaster. A lot of these individuals didn't really have dark side tendencies or were malicious people, but instead were forced to go to the dark side because of the strict structure of the organization and its control over every aspect of an individual Jedi's life. Barriss Offee didn't want to fight. They should have just let her continue being a medic. And Anakin Skywalker, he wanted to love.
I can't breathe.
In both the Old Republic and the Legends New Republic, there were Jedi who had relationships that didn't go to the dark side. Now, the Jedi, in theory, wasn't a tyrannical order, right? Like, you could leave if you wanted to, but the reality was this order became everything to you. It became almost like the family that you were taken away from. And so upsetting the culture and rules of the order can be traumatizing for some people, because it can lead to your expulsion from the order, which is as devastating as leaving a family you know and love. Such was the hypocrisy of the Jedi Order. They take you away from your family in order to replace all it provides to an individual, like guidance, worldviews, a sense of belonging. It's all about control and brainwashing at the end of the day. Brainwashing, which by definition is the process of pressuring someone into adopting radically different beliefs by using systematic and often forcible means, which is exactly what the Jedi did. Get these kids young, make them fall into this culture where if they don't follow the rules, they lose all the benefits of being in that group. And so seeing a guy like Jod Na Nawood gallivant across the galaxy as a rogue that's even more infamous than Han Solo in some ways, but with the Force, has been a long time coming. It might be the first time we've actually seen one of these kind of characters in live action, but there's a long history in both the canon and Legends lore of Jedi like this, who walked very close to being like heathens, or there were even dark Jedi and gray Jedi who rejected the Jedi Orders directly, but didn't completely embrace the madness of the Sith, which, was another very extreme belief system that was probably even more damaging and idiotic than the Jedi Order. And I love these characters. I think it's far more realistic for Force users to not want to join a system that essentially is trying to police their connection to this energy field that really makes them special, and in a lot of ways better than the average person. The fact that the Jedi Order have a monopoly over Force sensitives during their period of time leads to some pretty bad violations of individual liberty, if you think about it. I mean, every human being is born with the ability to do damage in their community. They could, use a blaster and do something crazy, or get a starship and ram it into a building, but not every person in the galaxy is taken away from their family at a young age and then indoctrinated into a system to prevent them from being dangerous. Having the Force is exactly like that. When you start cracking down on people before they even commit the crime you're worried about, which is going to the dark side, that is some precog kind of very dystopian type of mentality. It's not right. We don't know who exactly Jod is. The story has been dancing around his backstory and past for quite some time now. The fact that he has like 5 or 6 aliases makes me think that he's more than just a criminal, right? He might be a Jedi on the run after Order 66 trying to conceal his identity. And maybe he's been, living on this side of the law for so long he's forgotten all of his teachings. Or maybe he's just the Force user and he still has to run away from the Inquisition, well, when it existed, because being a Force user at any time in galactic history can be very dangerous if you aren't a part of a larger support system like the Jedi Order, right? That's the other side of the Jedi that it provides its members. There's some people who I believe really fit in well with this kind of systems, and then there's individuals like Jod. Either way, in a previous video, we came to the conclusion that when Order 66 happened, Jod would have been anywhere from a child to a young adult. So the timing for him to be one of the last Padawans in the Jedi Order is possible. But unlike Cal Kestis and Kanan Jarrus, who once again chose to walk on the light side of the Force, Jod has taken a much murkier route. It's definitely possible. Not all Jedi saved the galaxy by themselves again. And if you take a look at how Jod speaks, well, there are a lot of signs that he might be a Padawan. Today I want to take a look at a few quotes he says in this film. Many times he's reciting Jedi wisdom word for word, which is kind of strange unless he actually was a Jedi, because remember, he grew up during the Imperial period, a period in which the Emperor tried to destroy every trace of the Jedi. So most people thought the Jedi were a myth, let alone knew their tenets and their beliefs and their specific quotes and sayings. So this is kind of strange to me. All this information should not be accessible to a pirate. So either this guy's really crafty, he found some ancient Jedi temples, dug up a few books of Jedi proverbs and used that information to his advantage as a pirate lord, or he was actually there. He was actually at the Jedi Temple listening to these lectures that he most likely now has rejected. Or maybe a Jedi survivor trained him in the wild, which might be why he seems to have such a weird interpretation of the Force. I guess at the end of this video, you can tell me what you think. Is this guy an imposter with no Force powers and a fancy repulsor lift projector up his sleeve, or a Jedi who's lost his way, or something in between? Okay, let's start at the end. Let's work backwards from episode 5, where Jod basically reveals that he has some kind of understanding of one of the most important tenets of the Jedi Code. He finds Wim sitting alone in the cargo hold of the Onyx Cinder, sobbing away because he misses his dad and his mom, who might be dead.
Forget him. Your fears, your anxieties, your parents. They're what you call attachments. And they're the last thing you need.
Jod honestly sounds like some guy who went to one Jedi TED Talk, remembers a few things, but didn't really understand the entire lesson being taught. But now he just pretends like he understands, these lessons and adopts it into his own worldview and kind of customizes this saying to reflect his own reality. I mean, yeah, he doesn't like fear, he doesn't like anxiety, not because it could potentially lead you to the dark side, but because it makes you unable to act. It makes you vulnerable in a lot of ways. Same thing goes with parents. I mean, I don't know if he has parents. He might not have, or he might have a really bad relationship with them. And so he just wants to forget them and, store them away, far away, so that it doesn't create any kind of weakness in him. This is what he's worried about, weakness. This isn't exactly how the Jedi viewed attachments. For them, attachments were a pathway to darker things.
Attachment leads to jealousy. The shadow of greed, that is.
This is a more esoteric and religious part of the Jedi belief system, something that you really have to join the Jedi Order to kind of adopt, because it takes brainwashing, institutionalization to believe in these things, I think. It's not something you just believe if you were, walking by a Jedi TED Talk or were taught in the wild, where you don't have all that structure bearing down on you and teaching you these deeper lessons of what the Force actually is. I think the average individual is not going to really understand this battle between the dark and the light side that happens in the cosmic Force. This is this so-called balance the Jedi are always trying to achieve in the galaxy. It could also be that Jod was taught these lessons at too young of an age, so he remembers the words, but he doesn't necessarily remember the real value of this lesson and what it's trying to impart. Kind of like, Kanan Jarrus and his understanding of some of Yoda's teachings.
Do or do not. There is no try.
What does that even mean? How can I do something if I don't try to do it?
Well, see...
Or maybe that's a joke here. Jod is repeating Jedi quotes and then subverting the meaning of these quotes. He's showing us just how shallow and stupid some of the Jedi belief system is. But then again, the Jedi world is subverting their own teachings. I mean, if you were a really skilled Jedi, a Jedi philosopher, you knew how to kind of bend things around and make things work to support whatever you were trying to do.
Attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life.
Anakin has thought so much about attachments and Jedi teachings that he's able to spit game about it, which is impressive. That's a sign of a true disciple, someone who has really understood the teachings well enough to subvert them for his own advantage. But at the same time, he doesn't really have the wisdom to appreciate the true meaning of these lessons. Jod just seems like something else. There's not a lot of compassion in how he approaches Wim here. And I think the only reason he stays and says something to Wim is because he's not a complete psychopath. He sees that a child is in need, and then he sort of finds some kind of empathy with Wim because they are both kind of alone.
The truth is, I'm just like you, okay? I'm lost. I'm alone.
That's something he gets, and so he passes on these tough lessons he learned as a criminal to Wim in hopes that maybe it'll help him or something. Don't let your fear and anxiety overwhelm you because it makes you do stupid things, because it can get you killed. Forget your family. It's just going to slow you down, stuff like that. I mean, that's not how the Jedi is taught. They taught with compassion. There's nothing in the Jedi lore that says you can't love another person. You just can't get attached to them, if that makes any sense. I think a lot of people associate attachment and love as the same thing. I guess if you really love someone, you should be willing to let them go. That is the difference. But then again, I can actually see Ki-Adi-Mundi making a very similar argument to what Jod is making here when talking to children who miss their parents. The Potato Head Jedi was famous for just being extremely cold-hearted. He also left many of his children, at home while promising to just go out for a second to get some death sticks and just never returning. So empathy can lead to compassion, but in Jod's case, it doesn't always have to. Maybe Jod just sees a little bit of himself in Wim, and this is what makes him act here.
You have a powerful imagination. When you want to, you can see grand adventures even in a rotten galaxy like this.
Even pirates can be disarmed a little bit when they see a younger version of themselves. That brings, their more nostalgic and innocent past back up. And then there's this line here where Jod verbatim repeats a Qui-Gon Jinn quote.
Remember, your focus determines your reality.
Always remember, your focus determines your reality.
I've always hated lines like this. It reminds me of some kind of like manifest something into reality scam. Not that manifesting is completely wrong. I live a life where I dream of things and I try to achieve those dreams all the time. But to base your entire belief system on this kind of stuff, it's impractical. It's not realistic. There are real physical limitations that we all run into as human beings, and we going in that one extreme about manifesting has always that's always really bothered me when I see that. But once again, Jod's version of this Jedi phrase is completely different from Qui-Gon Jinn's phrase. Qui-Gon Jinn is assuming that Anakin wants to be a Jedi. He also wants Anakin to be a Jedi because of the Chosen One prophecy. Jod's quote is an attempt to cheer up Wim and remind him that he can do anything he wants. And I think in Jod's case, what he means by that is becoming a roguish pirate, thief, like he is, going on adventures and experiencing life for all of its wonders.
You have vision. Embrace it. Make your life the one you want to live.
That's definitely not something a Jedi would actually say. That's definitely something a Jedi who's left the Order would say, who's finally enjoying his newfound experience. So a lot of this dialogue is just kind of a mindfuck. I think the writers know that we're hanging on to every word Jod is saying because we are curious about who he is, what his background is.
But if you're not really a Jedi, how'd you do that?
So this is kind of the pattern where Jod just keeps acting kind of like a Jedi. He repeats some phrases that might sound like something a Jedi says, but we just don't know.
You are a Jedi, right?
I never actually said that.
But then there's this line he delivers to the kids in one of the earlier episodes. The kids were asking him, well, if you're a Jedi, why are you trapped in this prison? Why not break out yourself? And he says, well, I was waiting for someone with a ship to come by because I can escape, but I can't really escape off this asteroid without a ship.
I waited. The Force provided.
This is probably the most accurate use of a Force quote by Jod so far. This is literally how some Jedi think. This is how Qui-Gon Jinn thought a lot. Sometimes when they're faced with a difficult situation or at a dead end, some Jedi will literally just wait for the Force to do something or help them out. They'll just sit there and meditate. Now, Jod seems like a man of action, someone who does not let the fate of some magical force dictate what will happen to him. But it doesn't mean he can't point out things when miracles happen. It doesn't mean he can't just mock the Jedi teachings sarcastically, which is definitely the tone I'm getting from him when he says this line.
I waited. The Force provided.
And then later on, when Jod is trying to escape and tells everyone to find cover as two pirates run by, Wim expresses his belief that Jod can sense people through the Force, something that Jod does nothing to dispel. But then when KB does the same thing and senses a droid, most likely using a scanner, Fern sarcastically says this.
So I guess KB's got the Force too.
The Force flows through us all.
Look, Jedi or not, he is quick-witted. He's ready for these retorts, and he seems to know the code well enough to make a joke out of it. When the kids and Jod escape the pirate prison and are about to leave, Fern demands that he goes back for 33 and says, quote, the Jedi never leave a man behind. To which Jod responds,
First, it's a droid. Second, that's not a Jedi thing.
He's not wrong here. The Jedi do leave not only droids behind, but like actual living beings, sometimes their own Jedi brethren. There's actually nothing written in the Jedi Code that says they can't do this. The mission, the order comes first a lot of times. Of course, they tried not to leave a man behind, but if you do sacrifice everything to grab a person that you love or you're attached to, well, that is, like I said, an attachment, and that is a problem. And then finally, we have the scene where Jod is creepily looking at the kids while they're all sleeping. Well, everyone aside from KB. She just sits there and tells Jod that she doesn't trust him, having calculated the odds. It's something that C-3PO would have done to irk Han Solo, and Jod's response here is not that different from Han's.
Not everything in the galaxy can be calculated. Sometimes you have to trust your gut.
Remember, Solo was always skeptical about the Force until he wasn't. I theorize his no-look shooting abilities and his piloting abilities are most likely associated to the Force somewhat. He called it luck as a younger man, but as he got older, he kind of learned the truth. The Force is real.
The Force, the Jedi. All of it. It's all true.
Maybe Jod is something more like Han, a roguish individual who fell through the cracks of the Jedi system, an individual who, because he has the Force, sought out the Jedi Order by himself to kind of figure out what their teachings were because he needed guidance, right? It's scary to be in a world like this with the Force. And maybe the Jedi were like, you're too old, man, you can't join. Maybe they pulled an Anakin on him and, actually didn't bring him in. There's a lot of different scenarios that I think could have played out. I think there's a lot of ways that the writers can go with this. And seeing what they've done so far, I'm excited to see what comes next. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think is true about Jod Na Nawood. As usual, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. See you next time.